You're all set.
Okay, great. Hello, everyone. Welcome back. Welcome to the November 21st, 2022 meeting of the Community Board 6 Housing and Homelessness Committee. My name is Rich Mintz, and I'm the chair of the committee. Tonight, we are joined by Community Associate Alex Crawford. This meeting is called to order at 6:32 p.m. As a reminder, New York state law now requires all community board members to have their cameras on and their first and last name displayed from the time the meeting is called to order until the time the meeting is adjourned. If your camera is not on and your name not properly displayed, you cannot count towards quorum. Members of the public, you can raise any questions or comments that you have through the Q&A feature of Zoom. If there's time following the committee discussion, we will field questions from the public. We need a volunteer to take minutes tonight. If you can take minutes, please raise your Zoom hand now. It's an easier job than it used to be back in the olden days. I think that's, Ned Kilani's hand is up. Are you willing to do it?
I mean, I did it last time. It was really easy, so I'm happy to do it.
Yeah, it was actually helpful. You had the information I needed, so thank you for your double service. Everyone should have received an email from the board office with a link to a Doodle sign-up sheet for minutes takers at your committee meetings in 2022. For your convenience, the link to the sign-up sheet is being posted in the chat right now. We will now take attendance by roll call. Alexandra will conduct the roll call.
Committee members, I will call your name and you will unmute yourselves. When your name is called, please say present. I will announce if there is quorum. Abigail Cruzmark.
Present.
Rich Mintz.
Present.
Sandra Leftoff.
Here.
Maura Wong.
Present.
Eric Goldberg.
Present.
Did you say present?
Yeah. Present.
Okay, great. Michael Devereaux.
Present.
Nad Kalani.
Present.
And Matthew Weintraub.
Present.
Okay, we have a quorum.
Yeah, we have 100%. Excellent. Thank you all for coming. The agenda for tonight's meeting was distributed ahead of time by the board office and appears on the screen before you. If there is no objection, we will adopt the agenda as stated. Members of the committee, if you object to adopting the agenda, you may raise your hand through Zoom. Seeing no objections, the agenda for tonight's meeting is adopted. The minutes from the October 17th committee meeting were distributed ahead of time. If there is no objection, we will adopt these meetings as drafted. Members of the committee, if you object to adopting these minutes, you may raise your hand through Zoom. Seeing no objections, the minutes from the October 17th committee meeting are adopted and will soon be available on the CB6 website. Now to set some ground rules. In order to conduct an efficient meeting, no one may speak until granted the floor. Committee members, if you have a question about committee business or wish to make a motion, please raise your hand through Zoom. The chat function should not be used for committee business or questions about agenda topics. All such remarks should be made on the record by raising your hand through Zoom. Chat should only be used to alert us to any technical difficulties you are having or to state in writing information like an email address that was already stated aloud on the record during the meeting. When a committee member is given the floor to speak, I will identify you and you can unmute yourself so that you can speak. Committee members are required by the state open meetings law to have the Zoom cameras on and your first and last name displayed during tonight's entire meeting, from call to order to adjournment. If you must step away from your camera briefly, you're required to leave your camera on. So we will proceed into the agenda, and the first item on the agenda is a presentation by the Joint Task Force of Manhattan Community Boards on public restroom availability. And as a little background, we presented and our board approved a resolution in support of establishing more public restrooms in the city, and that was part of an effort organized by this task force in collaboration with the Manhattan Borough President's Office. So we are on record as supporting this initiative, and we are very pleased to have people here from Manhattan Community Board 5, and I think someone else. I'm not sure who actually showed, but I'm ready to hand the talking stick over to whoever's going to speak for you all. Alexandra, I think you have slides, but don't put them up until Julie tells us.
Oh, I'm happy to share too. I'm signed on onto two accounts. So the other one, Julie Chu, without my video, I can share screens if you give me permission on that account.
Yeah, I think you should have permission to share your screen.
Okay.
Yep.
So Renee is also on the calls. So Renee is the chair of the Budget, Education, and City Services Committee of CB5. And I've been working with her on bathrooms for a while, and Rich also on the public bathroom task force working group that we have. So feel free to jump in anytime. We're just going to share some facts, and we're here tonight to also hear feedback from your committee, because we believe that every district has different needs, and we're curious and want to hear what is going on in CB6. So it's been a big year for bathrooms. We have a city council had a budget request earlier this year, and intro 0258 just passed at city council. And then there's another intro on bathrooms that we'll talk about. And then we have some working group recommendations. So just some statistics on bathrooms. Right now we're looking at about 662 comfort stations out of our 1,700 parks, which is about less than 50% of our parks have access to public bathrooms. And then our subway stations, we have 472 subway stations. They were all closed during the pandemic. So, but before the pandemic, we had 78 bathrooms out of those number of stations. And recently they just announced that in January, they're opening 8 of the bathrooms. And then we have these automated public toilets, these sidewalk toilets, 5 of them in the city. We bought 20 of them in 2006, but only 5 of them have been installed after 16 years. And then this map also shows our transport hubs, and we'll talk a little bit about them later. Our public bathroom.
We have none of these public toilets in our community district, but looks like you have 2 in yours right near the boundary. Grand Central and Madison Square Park.
Yes, CB5
Grand
Midtown
Central
has,
is the transportation hub.
Yes, Penn Station, Port Authority, and Grand Central. We have 3 transportation hubs in CB5. And then we also have an APT, which is at Madison Square Park.
Very good.
Okay, and then the library system is also part of our public bathroom system. We have 216 libraries. We were counting NYPD stations as a potential access to public bathrooms, but this is, not everybody's going to be using these bathrooms. And then CB6 also have access to POPs. So out of 550 POPs in the city, only 14 of them have public bathrooms. And when we talk to DCP, all these bathrooms, the 14 POPs, were built in the 1980s. So something happened during the 1980s where the DCP was asking these developers for bathrooms. And I know Renee and we're on the land use committee. We've been asking developers coming our way when they present POPs, what the bathroom situation is. And something we want to talk to DCP about, incorporating a requirement for public bathrooms. Because right now, for POPs over 10,000 square feet in the zoning resolution, it's required to provide a food kiosk. So that's one of the required amenities. So we were thinking if food is a required amenity, maybe the next step is bathrooms. So that's about 1,100 public bathrooms in the city provided by the city, and only 2 of them, Penn Station and Port Authority, are available 24/7. A lot of them close.
Think
Yeah.
about that just for a minute.
Yeah, a lot of them close early. I think the parks bathrooms close pretty early, and I know the APTs is from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m.
The APTs are not open 24 hours?
No, they're not.
Oh my God.
That's something that could change pretty easily. But again, we want to get feedback from everybody because, there's always concern about safety, and that's number 1 priority with bathrooms.
Okay.
Then we were looking at public urination. So these are the 311 complaints over the period of 10 years that we mapped. You can see a heavy concentration in Midtown as well as up in Harlem. And this map is also showing public urination. We were trying to cite APT in Times Square, but then DOT alerted us that it requires a 5-foot depth, these APTs, which with all the subway lines in Times Square is just not feasible. So
Can you go back one, please?
Mm-hmm.
Just looking at that map, that park at lower right, is that, what is that? Is that Bellevue South? Hang on. No, it's something higher.
So
go ahead.
This looks like 42nd Street here. So this is 34th Street.
Yeah, that's
so this is around 36.
Oh, that's St. Barton. And okay, got it. Thank you.
Yeah. So we did some studies about citing these public bathrooms, these APTs. It expires right in 2026. So we only have 4 years left to cite them. So it's also about the APTs. These would be installed, maintained by JC Deco for free. So this is part of their street furniture deal in 2006, where they paid the city over almost $2 billion to install like 3,500 bus stops, 330 newsstands, and 20 APTs in exchange for advertising rights. All of those were installed except for 15 APTs.
So to clarify, we've paid for APTs that we don't have installed because the city can't furnish locations and infrastructure.
Right, it's the site. The siting, yeah. They haven't been able to find sites and this whole intro is going to be about siting, right? So we want to talk about that.
Okay. I'm sorry to keep cutting you off.
No, feel free to jump in. I think this is a whole process, and I encourage people to ask questions. The thing with comfort stations, we found that some of them are they're averaging $5 million. So $5,000 per square foot. And it's a very expensive. People have complained about that. The parks have been looking at alternatives such as the Portland Loo, APTs, trailer bathrooms to bring the cost down.
Can I just jump in? Can you explain to people the difference between a comfort station and an APT, just in case they're not aware of the lingo?
That's a good question. They've been calling parks bathrooms comfort stations. I mean, they were built in the early 1900s, right? It's such a long history, the comfort stations, and maybe that's they were like one of the first bathrooms, and maybe that's why that name stuck. But these are freestanding bathrooms in the park system, usually next to playgrounds, and close to the streets, or we prefer them.
The comfort stations are always physical buildings, not just an installed toilet in an enclosure. Right.
Yes. Okay. So the proposed substitution is a very different model, right? Some people prefer a building. It feels safer maybe for some because an APT is a lot more claustrophobic. The Portland Loo, we talked to DOT, they say it's pretty flimsy. You can go and visit them in Hoboken, and there's no privacy, which is a good thing for some situations where you don't want them to be hanging around in the bathrooms. but maybe not the most comfortable for others, versus a standalone building. Yeah, so not only cost, but time. It takes a long time to get these constructed. So there's definitely drawbacks. These are the APTs. Go ahead.
Sorry. So when you said I guess I put the slide up. Like these are the APTs that we already have. So we have like 15 of these like in storage somewhere, or what do we have in storage?
Yeah. 15 in storage, 5 installed. 15 in storage after 16 years. So these APTs, for those that don't know, they automatically self-clean. You put a quarter in, you get to use it for 10 minutes. After 10 minutes, the door opens. And you come out and the bathroom will be cleaned by hot water. And you need 5 feet of distance around the 3 sides and 8 feet in front, and then 5 feet below. So there's clearance issues. And then the other thing is, you need to find water, sewer, and electricity and bring it to this location, which GC Deco would do it for free, but it's just working with them. And it is 6 levels of approval needed, which is something we would want to review with the city if this happens again. You need council member approval, you need PDC approval, public commissions. I don't know if you need community board approval, but it's almost like a ULURP process to install these toilets. These are the inside panic buttons. There's a weight so that kids don't get trapped inside these bathrooms. So CB5 worked with DOT to site these bathrooms, and we located them next to POPs because POPs clearance gives you that extra open space so that we have such congested sidewalk with all the pedestrians. That was the advice that we received. So we looked at 5 POPs where they could possibly be located. This was right before the administration switched, so we didn't get a response from DOT, and we're in communication with them again, trying to assist them in this new intro that just passed because they're understaffed, and we want to make sure that they really look at this closely. That we'll talk about that. So these bathrooms, I don't know if you guys are familiar, this is next to the 2-3 in Times Square. There's 4 stalls here that you go in, and then there's a full-time attendant. So back in 1990, Boston Properties was building a tower right above this. In exchange, they provided renovations for the train station below and these bathrooms, and they paid Times Square Alliance, a local bid, $100,000 every year to provide the full-time attendant to monitor these bathrooms. They also provide cleaning and maintenance for the bathrooms. This was a community request for them. It's a public-private partnership that we're interested in, and we, when developers come, it's something to ask them for, because just exploring different options for bathrooms and how to create bathrooms. And then this last one that I'm going to touch upon is the community toilet scheme. This is from London. Germany has one too, where they pay retailers to open up their bathrooms to the public. There's a small stipend, and then they get advertising through it. Something we, in our recommendations, maybe talking to SBS or a local bid to help introduce this scheme as another way, because existing infrastructure, that's one way of opening up, getting access to public bathrooms versus new construction. So back in April, we saw that in the city council's budget recommendations to the city that they requested $250 million in capital funding for comfort stations. And they asked for $50 million per borough. And we think this came from council member in Queens, Shikar Krishnan, who is chair of the Parks Committee. And then Intro 0258 that just passed. So I have this here where the bill would require that the mayor designate an office in coordination with DOT and DPR to locate a bathroom for every city zip code, except for maybe the industrial areas. And they would require agency office to consider public and community board input. The study is due December of next year, so they only have a year, and we're finding that these agencies have low staff, and something we're recommending is that each community district look into their area and provide recommendations themselves so that their comments and special consideration is made, right? So that DOT isn't just doing this on their own without any input.
Did CB5 do a study that came up with those 5 recommended locations, or is that something you did organically inside the board?
Yes, the previous study was before the pandemic. So we were doing this on our own.
But did you pay a consultant to help with this, or was this all internal?
No, we did it internally.
Okay.
And
all right.
We worked with bids, and we also worked with agencies where we could, but it wasn't. Yeah.
Well, you have some big bids. I don't think we have anything quite like that on our side of the line. Maybe a couple smaller ones. But this is impressive work, because it's basically something you can hand to the authority that has to do the study and say, all right, we did a first round of legwork for you. Start with this. This is terrific.
Yes. Yes.
Do you have a list of criteria that was used to inform this study that perhaps we could look at if we were going to embark on something similar?
So when we made this presentation to CB7, we suggested, meeting with them to talk about citing maybe in a separate meeting. This is something that Renee and I just did on our own, where we looked at POPs and the photos, we're looking at certain POPs built before, the early POPs didn't have many planters. So you're looking at these photos and a lot of these POPs are very empty.
Yeah.
Because some of the more developed POPs have planters everywhere. So it just defeats the purpose of this open clearance that you need around the APTs.
So one thing I would say is I think you need to look at your district. So some of the people on our little committee, they are in a different district. So they sit in CB2, and CB2 has very different needs than us, and they don't have like a lot of crowds, and they have the waterfront, and they have their own bathrooms down there. They have bathrooms that don't have attendants. And so they have been able to use public bathrooms in a way that we haven't been able to, and they have a lot more space. So I think that you sort of have to survey your own needs first. Like our needs are like a lot of people coming in and a lot of sidewalks that are really busy. And so for us, it was like a different animal than say CB2. So it might start with you guys thinking like, okay, do we have a lot of parks, or do we have a lot of public spaces, or what are you thinking about?
Yeah, and we as a board, Amara, were you going to speak? I didn't want to step on you.
No, go ahead.
We have a lot of, we're under-resourced in terms of park space on our side. And we have a large day homeless population that has nowhere to go. And one of the priorities for us is making sure that their needs are accommodated. Because, they have their needs, whether we accommodate them or not. And that will alleviate some of the quality of life issues that some of our other residents talk about. We also have institutions that could be helpful, like the public health district along First Avenue. But the idea of going to Bellevue and saying, all right, help us with the restroom problem. It's such an immense organization that I don't even know how we would go about doing that. So, we need to have a longer conversation.
But one of the things that you could do is sort of like take Julie's, Julie, I say Julie, because Julie really is the expert on this. She truly, truly is. But you sort of look at all the public urination. You know, maybe one of the things is sort of look around Bellevue and sort of there's a lot of open data, and look at public defecation and public urination and see if that's a problem for Bellevue. It probably is right outside. I don't know. I'm making this up, but maybe it is. And maybe that's some of the information that you can go to Bellevue and say, you know, we want to work with you on this. Like maybe we can work on this, and maybe this is a way forward.
Yeah, we have a couple of areas where we know we have a lot of activity of that kind, like around 29th and 30th Street across, up near the UN, above the UN, like things like that, and also around Bellevue. But you know, the flip side of Bellevue is that there are the institutions there that provide some service to some of the people. There's just no sort of organized way. But yeah, we need to do exactly what you did and kind of take an informal conceptual survey of what we have to work with and where the needs are, and figure out how to match them up.
Do the hospitals along that first door, like say you have Bellevue, but like there's the NYU, I mean, can anyone just sort of walk in? I mean, I don't know.
The problem is that, you know, they're all different. Bellevue, Bellevue doesn't have restrooms that are easy to access as a walk-in. NYU does, but the experience is intimidating of walking in there. And there's no, I mean, if there's no signage, no one is going to walk into a big, intimidating institutional building because, you know, they won't feel welcome. And that's one of the things I like about the retail restrooms example that you all showed, is it makes it clear that you are allowed to be in the place. Because a lot of the problem is people, I mean, there are restrooms in your map of 1,000 that I didn't know existed, and even if I knew they existed, I wouldn't know that I was allowed to use them as a person walking in. So, you know, part of it, and I know we talked about this once in a task force meeting, the signage and the sense of public access is part of what's important.
Huge.
And if I recall the Battery Park Coalition, when they set up their public-private scheme for making restrooms available, we're good about signage.
Absolutely. I mean, I think you need to start thinking about sort of melding the bathroom issue with every single issue that tries to, I mean, Julie and I have tried to inject bathrooms into every single issue. Like open restaurants come up, Julie and I are raising our hand. What open restaurants, can they have a bathroom outside? You know what I mean? Can anybody use it? You know, land use pops, can a bathroom be inserted into that? So we're trying, you know, bathrooms should be part of the public realm in any which way it arises, right?
I mean, Julie said something I never thought about, which is that we're mandating food service, but we're not mandating restrooms. And I use the Flatiron Plaza all the time, but after I finish my coffee, 30 minutes later, I got to leave because, you know, there's no restroom available.
Exactly.
And I'm one of the fortunate people who has somewhere to go to take care of that problem.
Can I just have a question, which is, I'm trying to figure out, this sounds partly, this is Health and Human Services. This sort of overlaps with all the other committees.
Yeah.
Not just, it's not, so I'm a little curious, why are we doing this in housing? Isn't this Health and Human Services?
We have it because I was the one who was on the task force from our community board. It is an overlap. The way in which it is in our jurisdiction is that a lot of our restroom needs on a day-to-day basis are because of the homeless population, which is significant because of the health district and the men's shelter. But you're right that if we did anything, we should probably do it in collaboration with the health committee, which I'm also on. So I could probably help with that. And you're right that we should probably bring LV in sooner rather than later.
Right, because it just sort of specifying it here, it just, you know, I could see, because you talk about restaurants and so on, it's not the purview of particularly of this committee. It sounds like it's got a wider range.
Yep.
So, okay.
Do you all want to go on with your presentation? We've hijacked you.
No. I appreciate the questions. The other intro 05676 that hasn't passed is to require DPR to provide updates on the maintenance of their public bathrooms. I don't know if some of you, Comptroller Stringer in the previous administration put together a report called Discomfort Stations, where they reviewed all these bathrooms, and a lot of them are in critical conditions, hazardous conditions, and nobody knows if they were addressed. So that's something we want to, hopefully they will pass this as well. It sounds like Manhattan Borough President has a series of legislation that they're interested in. This is just the beginning. This is the article about the subway station bathrooms reopening soon in January. And then, our recommendations, we how to provide more toilets, and we can send you this, and then making it easier to locate bathrooms, not only signage, but maybe an app where you can find these bathrooms. Yeah, I think that's it. I think as a go ahead, the recommendations for intro 0258, it's DPR and DOT bathrooms, which are the APTs and the comfort stations that they have legislation over. So
Okay.
taking a look at your
Is there a stakeholder in each of those departments that is responsible for this, or at the moment is it just sort of a freestanding obligation that nobody owns?
Okay, well, I mean, I don't want to put too much pressure on them, but I know the street furniture individual is likely to be responsible for the bathrooms, because
I'm not trying to make trouble. I'm just trying to think whether
I don't want to
this
make
is
trouble
gonna
for
move
her
forward.
too, but I just feel like she may have to be responsible for this, and she's one person that had to deal with these APTs, and who knows who at DPR would be working on this. But we are trying to speak to DOT, I think, right, Renee? And hopefully we'll meet with them and get some more information on how they want to proceed, and if we can give them feedback in a timely manner.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you for this. Would you mind turning off your share so that we can see each other again?
Yes.
And I'll see if there are members of our committee who would like to speak or have their hands up or anything. And I see Michael's hand is up.
Yeah, thank you so much for the presentation. I do think it's important to have bathrooms around the city for the public. My one question is, I work in a business where we're kind of like almost like a traveling circus, and we bring our own bathrooms with us and everything, our own trailers. And has there been anything for Uber, Lyft, Postmates, them to throw money in for their people who work for their company to actually use bathrooms? Because it seems like a lot of these options are going to cost maybe taxpayers money. Has there been anything on the table where these apps actually have to pitch in? Because there is going to be a good share of their employees using the bathrooms, and they are making a lot of money in New York City. So it'd be something I'd really like to see them maybe put money towards.
Yeah, maybe we should speak to the Manhattan Borough President's office about this, because they passed legislation just specifically for the deliveristas and addressing their needs when they have no access. And I think they've been given access to bathrooms for restaurants.
Oh, did that pass? I remember that.
That's why I heard, but I need to follow up. But it sounds like something was done for them because they don't have access to bathrooms and they're always out and about. But I think we've been reaching out to stakeholders left and right, and maybe we should put Uber and Postmates on that stakeholder list where we just flat out ask them, and we're asked the city to ask them, because I think public-private partnership is important.
Maybe they can even put their name on the bathrooms and advertisement, like whatever they need to do.
Yes, whatever they need to do to help us get access.
So what would you like us to do you as a task force, as a community board in response to this situation as it currently stands?
I mean, we're here to hear feedback from every individual here, because they know the city, they know where they need access to bathrooms, and we recommend that CB6 does their part in making sure that whatever is cited works for them. And the thing is, this is just citing. They have no plan about funding the bathrooms after the citing. Who knows what's going to happen with this study? But
if we build a bunch of bathrooms and they're $10 to get in, we haven't solved the problem. So one thing we can do is actually think concretely about citing. Yeah. Okay. Maury, your hand is up.
Yeah, I'm just curious about those 15 APTs that are not currently cited. What is the holdup on having that done? It's been a decade and a half, you said?
yeah,
Even if we were to make a recommendation like you did, where is it going?
So when they were talking about this legislation at City Council, the DOT commissioner was saying that part of the reason is the community. He was saying that he tried to cite the fifth one on the upper Manhattan. That's the one he was responsible for when he was a council member, and there was so much community backlash. So part of the reason we're traveling, like meeting with all these community boards, is to hear who has the concerns. Because if we come together as community board and let these legislators know that we are for bathrooms, they can't use that as an excuse anymore to hold up the bathrooms. I mean, sure, there might be site constraint issues. We're trying to figure out what exactly is holding back the siting as well. Because this is not, after this deal expires in 2026, we want to know what happens next, right? Is DOT going to renew this contract with JCDecaux? What's going to happen with our sidewalk toilets? And the history with sidewalk toilets is back in the Dinkins administration, right? 30 years ago, they put 3 or 4 sidewalk toilets all around New York. They were used 40,000 times in a period of 4 months. It was deemed very successful, and every administration since Dinkins have been trying to cite these sidewalk toilets. So it's not just 16 years that these toilets haven't been installed, it's 30 years. Where you have New York Times articles saying City Council wants to provide 100 sidewalk toilets. Bloomberg, it was top 3 issues of Bloomberg administration with schools, bathrooms, and something else. Like every administration has tried.
One of our strategies from the toilet committee is in going around to all the community boards. As you have passed a resolution, we have passed a resolution, other community boards have passed a resolution. We want to go back to the borough board and say, look, we have every single community board passing a resolution and they've all said they're in favor of this. And so one of their objections saying that community boards don't want it, well, that's gone out the window. And as we all try and find sites, we're trying to find sites saying, look, we have at least 5 sites, at least please look at them and tell us why they don't work. You know what I mean? And we'll look for some more, but tell us why, so that at least we can try and figure it out.
Yeah. Okay. Matt, your hand is up. And then after that, we'll take one more, and then we should probably move on to the next agenda item.
I think I have an idea, but I just want to be sure. What was the pushback about adding the APT?
Well,
on the Upper West Side, you said there was pushback about installing one of the toilets.
If you Google it, there's coverage of it. Hang on.
I mean, Commissioner Rodriguez during his testimony was saying that he experienced a lot of backlash from the community, and it was very hard to get them installed. That was his comment to City Council.
But we don't know the subject of that backlash.
I mean, we know that there are issues around people concerned about criminal activity in and around the bathrooms, and there are people concerned about cleanliness. And I think cleanliness is. I think both of these are sometimes, proxy complaints. about not wanting people who are homeless in the neighborhood, but that doesn't mean they're legitimate complaints. There are real things. There are real things that people are concerned about, and one reason why the APTs are preferable to some other models is that, in theory, they're cleaned every time, and the amount of time people can use them is limited. But you know, I mean, I'm sure that given that you can't, I mean, you could barely walk 100 feet in New York without coming across a school or a playground. I'm sure there are people who say we don't want public toilets near our children, you know, all of that stuff. Julie, are there specific issues that you all have heard? Objections?
I mean, so we spoke into CB1, 5, 6, 4, 7 in Manhattan and CB2 in Queens, right? These are mostly Midtown or Lower Manhattan. We want to speak to Upper Manhattan, you know. I was in the Bronx in Mont Haven, and I was speaking to the park supervisor of the Community District 1 over there, and why are the comfort stations locked? He's like, if they were unlocked, people would be, you know, doing drugs there. And, you know, this might be legit for certain districts, and we want to understand that. You know, one of our solutions is some of them might need funding for full-time attendance, right?
Yeah.
That's one solution.
Which is what they did in, that's what they did in Battery Park City, like their staff for some of these locations.
Yeah, I mean, to eliminate a needed amenity because of a certain population, like that bathroom is next to the playground. The kids in that playground needs the bathrooms. So we can't just close it because of the concern, but maybe there's another, they can provide them with some maintenance or, you know, operational costs for full-time attendance.
I mean, don't get me started about no seating in Moynihan Station, or the meeting will go on for an extra hour. It's the same problem.
Yeah.
All right. Well, since I don't see any hands up, I think we should probably move on, but I really appreciate you all coming, being so open and conversational with us. This is a topic we've talked about separate from this initiative and as part of this initiative, and we would like to help.
Yes, I think we're going to try to meet soon again, the public bathroom working group, hopefully after Thanksgiving. So we'll be in touch.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
So Maura, since I know you have some issues, some information about this, we should probably follow up after the meeting at some point to talk about it. All right, I have to find the script again on my desktop. All right, I'm ready. I don't have anything to say. We just move into the next topic, and you all don't have to wait through our next topic, which is tenant issues. You're welcome to stay, but you don't have to.
Thank you.
All right, so let me pull up my notes on this. So we talked previously about building some expertise inside the board about some categories of issues that we want to cover, including tenant issues as an important one, but also affordable housing development and housing availability, issues facing owners, and homelessness issues. And Sandra was intimidatingly fast enough to come up with a long list of possible action items for us, which I'd like to talk about. And in a minute, Alex, I'm going to ask you to put this document up on screen. But before I do, I just want to mention that, as some of you know, the reason that I've been so disconnected for the last month is that my mother died about a month ago, just before our last meeting. And she's in San Francisco, and settling her affairs, and in particular, dealing with the contents of her house, is going to take a fair amount of my attention. It did this month, and I'm probably going to end up having to spend a week, a month for the foreseeable future dealing with the project in stages. So I'm going to talk to Abby after this meeting about ways in which she can absorb some of the leadership responsibilities of this committee, and also all the rest of you are welcome to become experts and motive forces in your areas of interest. Kyle, I'm also talking to Kyle about this. So I'm not stepping back, but I want you to be aware that there's a reason why I've been so hard to reach in the last few weeks. And now we can go on to the topic, which is, Sandra, do you want to walk through this stuff yourself? Do you want to be the convener of this conversation?
Sure. I just need to see the list. Wait.
Yeah, you can zoom in and make it big.
Yeah. Wait, I don't know how to do that. That's okay.
No,
I can see it.
Yeah, I'm talking to the presenter. There we go.
Okay. Just so why I did it not so fast actually was so that we could have be proactive in what we want to deal with, I guess, for the rest of this year, that we have a topic or two that we want to get into so that we can work on over the course of the year. So that was my thinking about the list, right, of what would be issues that might be of interest to the committee that we would want to put some time into pursuing. So should you want me to just go through what the
Sure.
the
and
what?
we can chat about them as you see fit.
Well, okay. The first one was the notion of the expertise of that there should be someone of expertise. So which I think is a reasonable point. I didn't want to be that person, but I really felt it should be someone.
Too late. Sorry.
I don't want to do that, but somebody in the community board, in the administration, where if somebody calls the office, the person is really quite knowledgeable and somebody that we can really rely on. So of course I thought of Alexandra. So some of the suggestions were about getting resources for training of her if she would do it. I'm sorry to do this to you, Alexandra. But so that was my first thought of how would there be someone with expertise that continues over time who we can rely on. And so that was the beginning part of the, I think I mentioned the Manhattan Borough president at one point, under Gail Brewer, and I don't know what's happening now. They actually were training, there's something called the Service Corps at CUNY, and where they got a bunch of money to have students as interns, and then they got special training whenever they were placed in various organizations. A number of students were placed in the Manhattan Borough President's office. They were trained on open data, et cetera. What the plan was, and I don't know what happened, was to go back to the community boards and train people in the community boards. So that seemed like one of those things that would be worth finding out if it happened and how we might then tap into that. So both, would they be, would the Manhattan Borough President's office be available to fund someone gaining the expertise in our office, both generally on issues of housing and also on their databases. So that was the first part of this. Let's see, you have to and so then that was, I mostly was doing, because it's what my interests are as a tenant and a rent stabilized tenant. Mostly what you're going to get is the rent stabilized tenants perspective. So that list is very biased of my interest. So you have to tolerate that. But I found out some things I certainly didn't know. It's an interesting process gaining some quote expertise in this. There's an amazing amount of information out there. So one of the things, I'll just go down the list. So I'm in a building that's a condo building. When we moved here many years ago, it was a rental building. Most everybody was rent stabilized. As it was transformed, a lot of the tenants were gently urged out, to say the least. They were tormented out and so on. But what happened in that transformation was the people who remained the rent stabilized tenants really had they have no voice, either in the functioning of the building or even virtually in a presence, which I think is not a good situation in both for the condo people or for the rent stabilized. Of course, my heart is with the rent stabilized, who are really quite marginalized. And the issue is the condo board does not have to have any representation from rent stabilized tenants. So the resolution that I proposed was to bring this up, to write a resolution to say that there needs to be representation of a rent stabilized tenant on these boards. It's a recognition. I always do it as the, in the Constitution, we initially said only the landowners were allowed to have a voice. And I think we really represent that in the way that condos and co-ops are set up, which is only the owners can have a voice, which I think is quite detrimental to a democratic society. But that aside.
And that dovetails with your item 5, which is the loophole.
Oh, dear God, right.
When those people leave their apartments, leave stabilization.
Right. One of the things I did find in doing this background was the horror of learning that the 2019 rent stabilization law, which we were all very grateful for, took the real pressure off of rent stabilized tenants in terms of losing their apartments, because we were quite vulnerable to what landlords would do. And thank goodness in New York, the state legislature passed the law, which was really quite protective of us. What I didn't know in that was that in condo and co-op buildings, individuals who had their apartments, like we all did, the building went condo, but it was a non-evict transformation. We kept our apartment. I assumed that we were all continued to be protected, same as the rental buildings, which was when I left my apartment for whatever reason, it would continue as a rent stabilized apartment. In fact, that isn't the case. So if I leave voluntarily or not, the apartment reverts to the owner and it is off the rent stabilization protection. And so it's either market rate or can be sold, which means that the harassment and so on that we had gone through for years, we can still be vulnerable to. And that was really quite shocking. And that needs to be known. I mean, that's part of it, information that needs to be out there. That's part of it. That would be the hope of the education that somebody on the board gets. And it raises another issue: is do we want to use to have as a link on our website this kind of information for individuals that they can pursue? Okay, so where are we? Okay, so that was the resolution. That's yes, the loopholes. Well, the information, that was only something I found out while I was doing some of this, but I think it would be great to have on our website some of this information. Okay.
Warehousing is the next topic.
Right. The warehousing, one of the things that came out, and there's some question about the data on that one. It came out that there are a lot of rent stabilized apartments are being warehoused. Apparently Carlina Vera has a proposal, which I guess you said we voted on.
We did. Her. Yes.
Which was good, to at least gather the data on, on these warehouse. No, it's not to gather data. It's to have them registered. All these warehouse apartments need to be registered, and they need to be inspected some percentage every year. The issue is, do we want to get involved in this at all? I also spoke to Sarah, I forgot her last name, in Liz Kruger's office, who's also involved in this issue. Her view is it's not clear what we can do. You can take it on, but it's a very complicated issue. There's concerns about this getting up to into the courts, and that can backfire in various ways. So that going ahead and wanting to prevent owners from warehousing apartments, which is honorable, can down the road have detrimental effects, harmful to the whole rent stabilized package. So, and again, it's not clear what we could do if we want to get involved in that at all. Okay, and then there's there is in the Carlene Rivera's office suggested that we can get a speaker from the mayor's office to protect tenants again, which would give us some greater idea of what some of the issues are. Okay, so
And now, if you don't mind, and now on top of that, we have the DA's
yes,
tenant protection office that is being convened, which Eric Strasser described at full board earlier this month. And Sandra, you've had some correspondence with him about this, right?
no, I only asked him what the relation was between what their tenant protection and the mayor's office. And he said he answered today, right? He said that they're separate, they're totally separate. And it sounds like he goes after people legally. I don't know. I didn't get in touch with the mayor's office, so I don't know what they do.
Okay.
But that was what the correspondence was. Okay, so, and I don't know what else.
What else do I have in this document?
Well, there was also good cause eviction, which we started talking about last spring. Do we want to go further in that? We were going to have a town hall meeting on it. So
yeah, I mean, it's definitely dead in the current session.
Yeah, well,
and I don't know if anyone's bringing it back. Alexander, will you scroll down and put 6 at the top? There we go. Do we know if there's any legislator who's planning to carry it in the new session?
I don't know of any, right.
I mean, it failed. The landlord industry basically killed it. They spent a lot of money.
Well, and Hochul sat on it, quite honestly. She had it in her possession. She just wouldn't do anything with it. So, and she got a lot of money from real estate, but that's on the side. I think the issue probably for us is there anything of interest? How do it's a long list. What do we want to do? And how do we pursue or not? Do we want something, an agenda or some agenda items that we're dealing with on some ongoing basis? And where do we want to go with that? So I certainly know I'd like to do a resolution about having the most concrete one is to have rent stabilized tenants on these boards, right? So they have presence and
that's a good one.
But that's one of a list, and it's to be worked on. But it's what we as a committee would be interested in.
Eric, your hand is up.
Sure. Just 2 thoughts on this list, and thank you so much, Sandra, for putting it together. It's certainly quite extensive and covers, I think, many of the issues that we've discussed previously. This is just for conversation. I feel like there are probably issues that are hard to tackle, but just looking at it from a market rate tenant perspective, 2 things come to mind. One is there's been so much conversation about constraining the ability of tenants to use Airbnb for long-term leases. But one of the things for me that always seemed to strike an interesting balance is if a tenant could Airbnb their place for 30 days over a full year as a way to really provide some revenue and income for a tenant. I know there's a lot of issues around taking units out of circulation, and that increases overall pricing. But if you are a tenant and it's your home and you just want to do 30 days over the course of a year, that seems more reasonable to me, and it doesn't have that negative effect of taking units out of circulation. So anyway, just something to think about, given all the pushback on allowing tenants to kind of use their place as an Airbnb. So that was one area, just with rising rents, how you could do that. And the other one that kind of always comes to mind is when people are looking for housing and all of, I guess, the obstacles that are in the way of the costs and the charges of brokers' fees. And I know there was a lot of legislation that I think Keith Powers put forward that never came to bear, where the landlord would have to pay broker's fees, but the tenants wouldn't have to pay broker's fees. And I think that passed, and then it got pushed back. But those two things come to mind is sort of those costs that often get borne by tenants. And then the other piece around that is, I always think that the Department of Housing or the Department of Buildings, they should have floor plans on file for every apartment in New York City. And it's just always strange if you're looking for an apartment that you get kind of sidetracked by a broker who won't show you what the actual floor plan is in an apartment. You see random pictures, you see hand-drawn floor plans, but I don't know, why can't there be access to floor plans for units? It'll make it a lot easier when you're looking for a unit that it says spacious and you see it's 10 square feet versus 2,000 square feet, or you could see layouts. So those are just a few things that sort of come to mind.
Right. That last one sounds like it should be an open data portal issue, right? It should be available to some open data system.
Yeah.
I don't know, but yeah.
Well, I mean, creating that information would be the hurdle, since a lot of that doesn't exist. But I think it'd be interesting if we did it, and I definitely think that the Airbnb thing, it's a sort of threading the needle approach that could be worth discussing. So we should put that on our mental list as a. I mean, it doesn't address the fundamental problem of rent, but it does address, for some tenants, the question of how they pay the rent, which is
I think there's two things with the I think there's two things with the Airbnb piece. One is, there was always the question of taking housing out of circulation, and that raises the overall cost. And then there's the safety piece, right?
Yeah.
This kind of addresses the circulation item, but not the safety piece.
Right. Matt, your hand is up.
First, I just want to echo everybody else. Sandra, it's clear you put in a lot of work. This is really flushed out, and I really appreciate all the hyperlinks in there, which I've not had a full chance to go through everything yet, but I'm extremely impressed. I think there are like some kind of tangential ways we can support renters. And one way to think about that is like, asking the question, what makes the market pricing so high? And there's like obviously multiple variables. And I was just wondering if this is under our scope or if this would more be under land use. But I've been learning more about like non-market housing, like more government housing, and how that can drive down the pricing for privately owned, privately rented apartments. And I was just wondering if that's something we could try to support as a community board.
Well, we are on record as supporting Councilmember Rivera's social housing bill package from last spring, which is stalled but still technically in council. And I think we definitely, as a board, would support any ways of getting more housing in the hands either of nonprofits or in public hands, if it could be funded for operation as well as construction. Sandra, go ahead.
I actually just wanted to ask what you meant by government housing. You didn't mean NYCHA, right? What, you meant something else?
Well, Rich just touched upon it. I know that in some other countries, there are setups where nonprofits run the housing at like little to no cost. Like it's rented by the government to that nonprofit for almost nothing, for the purpose of that nonprofit then, creating quality, affordable housing.
Okay. I guess the question, I don't know, do we have that do we have it in this country?
I mean, the model that we have is cooperative housing, which we have a few. And if you may recall, one of the bills in Councilmember Rivera's package would give nonprofits on a certain list of approved entities the right of first right of purchase when multi-unit housing goes on the market for the purpose of converting it into a collective or a cooperatively owned development. All of these sort of just are improvements around the edges because the real problem is supply, but they're not nothing, and if a 200 unit building gets adopted into a cooperative model, that's 200 units that are safe forever, in theory.
Just to clarify, the only government owned would be something that somebody defaulted on their taxes, right, on property taxes that the city owns. Or is there some other, isn't that the only source of government owned?
There's government built housing, like NYCHA, which is
that's NYCHA, right?
Yeah,
but that's not what we're talking about with this, like the co-op.
No, that's different. But I mean, I think the general need is for there to be more housing that is operated by public interest models, other than for-profit landlords, and some of that is. I mean, I would love to see the federal state partnership build more buildings. It's not going to happen in the short term, but it is something that we should push for as a society, in my personal political opinion.
That would be great.
I don't think we can do it. I don't think we can achieve it on the board. But it's definitely an idea.
But Matthew, what were you thinking of where to go with that?
Well, I mean, I guess I was just thinking about like what the lack of a seeming balance. Like, again, in our district, there's been tons of luxury condominiums going up. And it's like, for some reason, it doesn't make sense to me that we would continue to provide incentives for those to be put into our neighborhoods without at least matching them with more public and affordable housing. So unless there's something I'm missing with them coming in and like providing affordable housing within the units within those buildings, which I haven't seen any kind of sign of.
Right.
There's some in some of the buildings. We just had this large project approved in Astoria, Long Island City yesterday, which is going to be 45% affordable. But affordable means income restricted, not actually affordable. It means the rent is set based on some percentage of the area median income, but it's still not affordable to most people. And like you were saying, we need some more radical models if we actually want to build more units that ordinary people can afford to live in. Any other questions, comments? Well, Sandra, what are the 2 things or 3 things that you think we should most directly do in the short term? One sounds like your resolution on having tenant representation on those boards.
Yeah, I would. Yes, but that's that's very personal. Yes, I think having getting expertise in the office on these issues, getting so that when somebody calls, we have someone we can turn to. I think having if we want to consider having on our website additional information, about like these tenants, the mayor's office for tenant advocacy, the DA's office, and so on, so that and the websites, the expert would really be able to tell us what their websites were, and I think we then need to consider as a committee, do we want to then have that kind of information available for people on the website? So it's the education, the gaining the expertise, and then making it available on the website, the resolution, and let's see, and then I go from there. I mean, then it's what's of interest. I think the notion of the market rate, I mean, a number of things got brought up. The invisibility of the issues of market rate apartments is unfortunate, right? I mean, that's, and I think that discussion we had in the spring was, it was amazing. And I thought went to the heart of the issue for a number of, for many people are in these market rate apartments and they have no protections. So Eric, your version of Airbnb, open that up as a way of trying to deal with the expenses, but pursuing some aspect, even I thought the idea of a town hall and see where that went would be, and that gives people the opportunity to talk about what the difficulties are, the instability it creates and so on. So that would be one I would think would kind of balance the issues of what are rent stabilized issues, what are market rate issues. So that would be, let me see, let me take a quick look at mine. I think also the notion, and maybe we do or don't want this, the sophistication of the data analyses that are going on in housing now is kind of amazing. And there's this group, I think I mentioned it, the Housing Data Coalition, which are these very talented people who are using all kinds of data analyses to understand what's going on in housing. The Just Fix website is very useful. Do we want to reach out and get some training in that as a group, right? So we can begin to know how to dig through the data that's available. So that would be another question, another aspect of, do we want ourselves to be more trained in the data sources that are out there now? And then we can begin to, even the question of where are the floor plans? And that would be a question, right? That we might want to have somebody give us a lecture on, in general.
Boy, if we want to generate a bunch of press for ourselves, all we have to do is propose that all apartment floor plans have to be publicly available and watch the fire come down from the landlord industry. But it wouldn't necessarily be a bad thing. I mean, I think it'll be interesting.
It would be very interesting. Yeah.
All right. I think this has been a good discussion. The one concrete action item is there someone who wants to write a resolution about having tenant representation on condo and co-op boards, which would require a little bit of research to find out whether this is something, how they're regulated, whether this would be a state or city requirement and so forth.
Oh, interesting. Okay. I mean, I could do some of the background. If there's somebody who wants to work with me, I would appreciate it. But I can, start.
Who wants to be in a club with Sandra?
No, you never want to be in a club with me. But if you have some interest in finding out about it, which you may or may not want to do, but I can get some. I can start getting.
You can take. Yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah. Okay.
All right. Well, this has been a terrific discussion driven by excellent research. And so I'm grateful to you, Sandra, and to everyone for participating. I don't think I have any other topics. Does anyone else have any old or new business that you would like to discuss? If you do, please raise your Zoom hand. Matt, your hand is up.
Not me in particular. I just noticed in the Q&A there are a lot of very specific questions that were asked by, I think, a member of the public. So I just wanted to make sure that those did not go unnoticed and that we could maybe discuss them if we have more time in the future.
Okay, I'm eyeballing these. And I think we're going to need to have the office follow up, because these are all issues that we can't answer here, but we have the email addresses of the people in the Q&A since they're registered. So the office can follow up. I just want to make sure that we capture those. And the one that I can address is Mark Haddad asked about community advisory boards for shelters when they're established, and that I would say that happens intermittently, not reliably, and that is something that we should probably follow up on in regard to specific facilities. So you know, when the boards do get established, they're somewhat pro forma roundtables that meet once a month or every once in a while to discuss issues, but at least they provide you know, some formal contact inside the institutions and so forth. But I will have the office follow up with you regarding cabs for the shelters that we know about in our district, and the rest of these. Alex, should I screenshot these, or will we have them when the meeting ends?
I've already taken note of them. So
okay, great.
Yeah.
And you have the names of the individuals?
Yep.
Okay, terrific. All right, thanks to all of you. Thank you for bringing that to my attention. I can't see that window when I'm looking at you. All right. Well, since we have no items of new business, I am in a position to ask for motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Thank you. If there are no objections, we will adjourn the meeting at 7:48 p.m. And thank you all for making this enjoyable and interesting.
Thanks, Rich.